The cartel is immaculately structured. We don't know this because the media only shows you what they want you to see. There wasn't kilos of cocaine under the floorboards or millions of dollars on the wall. That's what Netflix will show you.
The cartel don't have that rule that you don't touch women or children.
No, if it's in the way of your target, it's a casualty. You're not going to think twice about it.
How does an FBI agent marry into the cartel?
And we got engaged after 4 months, so that was probably like red flag number one. I was going to go into the feds because I wanted to be a profiler. I wanted to find out how and why somebody can do this to another person. In what mindset do you have to be able to do this to somebody else? When you kill once, you can just continue to kill so many times. You just go numb after a while. It f***ed me up so bad. I mean, a 15-year-old, how do you process a person getting chopped up into pieces, somebody that you knew, and then the family decided to put the body parts in a box? They didn't even cremate her. So I couldn't even go to the funeral because there was a box with pieces in it. It was like legs, some arms, a head. They never found her torso.
Today's show is sponsored by the law offices of Armand Gregorian. If you're injured in a car accident and need proper guidance and representation, reach out to the law offices of Armand Gregorian, 1-818-404-0333. Also, today's show is brought to you by The Cabinet Spot. If you're remodeling your house and you need custom cabinetry or prefab cabinets, reach out to The Cabinet Spot. Tell Vic we sent you at 1-888-495-0210, The Cabinet Spot. Lastly, the Glen Arden Club. If you're interested in networking, cigars, scotch, and a great environment, reach out to us. We'll connect you to the boys at the Glen Arden, and you'll become a member here. Smoke with the WiseNuts, smoke with a great network, and build your network. Happy Monday, everybody.
TGIM.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. We want to thank Angelica Robles for taking time out of her Monday to be with us.
Yes, thank you. It's a privilege.
All the way from Houston, Texas.
Yes.
How was the flight in?
It was long.
Why?
Especially because the guy next to me just kept talking.
You know, I used to enjoy flights where you could have a conversation, but now it's like you sit down, everybody puts their headset on, and they intentionally ignore you.
There's some people that don't know boundaries, though. Like, he was falling asleep and he was doing that. And I was like, get your hair off of me.
He was trying to nap on you.
Yeah. I was like, it ain't that type of party. No.
Oh, it's not a Diddy party.
And it was only 2 seats. And I was like, no.
2?
I upgraded my flight.
You were in business class.
I was.
And still he was leaning on you in business class?
Yes, I know.
You should have gone cargo class. That's what I do. Where the luggages are. Nobody interrupts me.
Nobody interrupts you. You can lay out.
Did he maybe know you were a Fed?
No.
Trying to get some intel?
No, but you know those people that just like, what are you doing here? What are you here for? Are you an actress?
Oh, because you're flying to Los Angeles.
Yes.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah.
I think it was some type of engineer. I wasn't listening.
Because usually when I'm flying to Los Angeles, they think I'm being deported. That's why.
We're getting a gender transition change.
I was trying to watch Beetlejuice, and he's like, were you born when the first one came out? I'm like, yeah, I'm in my 40s. He's like, no way. I'm like, yeah.
Are you in your 40s?
I'm 42.
Oh, so you're 1982.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're younger than me, older than him.
Yeah, I preserve well.
Joe.
See, that's why we mesh well together. We're all like somewhat
different
of the same generation.
Well, you're still a millennial, though.
Yes.
See, Joe and I are Gen X. We're the last of the Gen X.
Yes. Yeah.
And you two are millennials.
Damn right.
Yeah.
Last of the
That's
Mohicans.
why her and I are vibing too.
We've also been drinking for like 3 hours.
Seriously, I can't believe we didn't have one of those. What's it called? Bump mic? Is that what it's called?
Oh, boom mics.
Boom mics. Yeah. We had amazing conversation prior
Right.
to the show.
So here's what we want to do. And Angelica actually gave us the idea. We want to set up something where it'll be an exclusive type of behind the scenes with the WiseNuts, where we set up a boom mic, set up a camera, and you can join us by shooting the shit with us. And we're not going to tell you exactly how. We're still working out the details, but it'll be a somewhat exclusive type of membership where
Right.
you'll be able to join us.
Yeah, because we had some good combos.
Oh yeah.
We
Oh, yeah.
we
Good
had a guest.
combos.
Yeah, we had a guest call too. So
Yeah, that was an incredible guest call.
Oh yeah.
right.
Oh yeah. But let's start off with this. How does an FBI agent marry into the cartel?
I didn't know. I really didn't know, but it was a humbling moment for me because I'm considered a world class interrogator. So I guess love is blind, right?
Love, depending on the situation, absolutely, or depending on the person. I'm sorry. When did you decide that you wanted to become an FBI agent?
Very young. I was 15.
15 years old.
Yeah.
What was it exactly that made you want to get into law enforcement, though?
So I grew up in Cicero. So those that are Al Capone fans, Cicero pretty much ran, or Al Capone ran Cicero.
Which is where?
So Cicero is in Chicago. It's like the Mexican hood.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up there, high violence, mostly immigrants from Mexico, low income, gang affiliated. I mean, it's crazy. But so I grew up in the hood and I was dating a boy at the time. I was 15, he was 16. His sister went on a first date and was murdered, dismembered, and decapitated.
At the age of 16?
She was 21, but went on a first date with a cartel member that owed money. And the guy that killed them got paid $2,000. But this guy was diabolical. He wasn't all there. He shot them, murdered them, and cut them into pieces with samurai sword. Flipped them upside down and drained their blood in a bathtub. The pieces, and this is very much cartel activity. He took the pieces and he dispersed them all in Chicago, north side, south side. So the way that they were identified was his leg was floating in the Chicago River and he had a tattoo of a heart that said mom on it. So fishermen saw the leg, pulled it out, and they posted it on the news and said, anybody's kid? And they're like, yeah, that was our missing son. So weeks passed, then they found her head and it was completely decomposed. So the only way they were able to identify her was with dental records. She was wearing braces.
So she was a victim
Wrong
by
time.
default,
Right.
because she happened to be dating somebody who was part of the cartel.
Not even dating. She
It was a
went on
first date.
First date.
First date.
I mean, talk about wrong place,
At the wrong
time.
time. That's practically the story. And the crazy thing about it is the guy tried to say he was insane, not guilty due to insanity. But there were so many plans. He had the samurai swords sharpened, and he was pretty much an assassin. They pretty much said, "Hey, this is the hit. Go get it done." And because she was with him, she had to go down too. You can't. I mean, she wasn't gonna. They were not gonna let her go. There's no way. The cartel.
The cartel don't have that rule that you don't touch women or children.
No. If it's involved directly to your target, no. Just like terrorists. Not at all. They don't think twice.
Children as well.
Children as well. Yeah. If it's in the way of your target, it's a casualty. You're not going to think twice about it.
How do you build up the courage to do something like that?
When you kill once, you can just continue to kill so many times. You just go numb after a while. Just like us feds, after our first kill, we go through therapy. And then once you've killed once, it becomes easier to do it again.
So was that the turning point for you where you decided to become a federal agent?
Yeah. It fucked me up so bad. I mean, a 15-year-old, how do you process a person getting chopped up into pieces, somebody that you knew, and then the family decided to put the body parts in a box? They didn't even cremate her. So I couldn't even go to the funeral because there was a box with pieces in it. It was like legs, some arms, a head. They never found their torso.
Oh my
So imagine you sitting at a wake with a closed box and you know what's in the box.
I could only imagine what the parents were going through.
Yeah, I mean, the parents went through hell and back in a handbasket, right? But the biggest story was how it was so close to home, right? Like you never think that things like this will happen to people like you. And it did. And I think as a 15-year-old, like, how do you process that? You know, I come from a Hispanic family. We don't talk about our feelings. Yeah, I remember my mom, like, she's at rest now. She's at peace. But like the processing of thinking how this man sat there and chopped body parts. It's very difficult to chop body parts, if you guys know. It's very difficult. You got to go through skin, you got to go through muscle, and you got to go through bone.
Yeah, I was telling Armand that last week when we were chopping up a body. I was like, bro, we got to use sharper knives.
Yeah.
Told you to use
A
the chainsaw.
But the problem with the chainsaw, it makes so much mess, and then you got to extra clean up.
Yeah, and then California has that no gas law. We ought to go with like the electrical.
Well, you could have used your neighbor's lawnmower. Guy with the extension cord. That's front yard.
Yeah, it's crazy. And here's the other crazy part is when the transcript finally came out of the actual the court records, it was insane. Like it's out there in public record. Like you can look it up on public law or whatever it is. And if you go through it, like he explains how he tried to kill her and she was still alive. How he had a knife stuck in the back of her brain and she was still crawling away. And then he grabbed her head and put it in the toilet and was trying to drown her and she was still alive. Like she was fighting for her life.
She was tortured at that point.
He pretty much in the stand, he said this was the toughest person to kill out of all his kills.
Why don't they just shoot him dead? Why?
He did. He shot her in the head and him in the head. He didn't suffer. She did. Because she was still alive. With a bullet in her head.
After shooting them, he decapitated them.
Well, first, before you chop the body up, he flipped them upside down and drained the blood because it's a lot of mess. When you chop up a body, it's a lot of mess, a lot of blood everywhere. That's evidence.
And where did he do all of this?
In his house, in his apartment in Chicago.
In his apartment.
He literally hung them upside down and drained their blood.
Like cattle.
Yeah, like cattle, like a deer when you hunt a deer. And then he gutted them. I wouldn't say he gutted them, but he had to cut them. But imagine having to cut with a samurai sword.
I'm at loss for words for this because just picture this, man. You know who the guy is. You have no idea who the girl is. At this point, you could wait for the date to end and be like, all right, there's my guy. He's the victim. I got to go after him. But this guy had no remorse for who this young lady was, who her family is, where she's going, what her future looks like. It was just like, I don't give a shit.
This is a job.
I'm killing one guy. I don't have time to wait for the date to end. You're going with him.
Right. What was the motive, though?
Because the guy owed him money. The guy owed the cartel money, and it was only like it wasn't that much. I think from the reports, it was like $2,000. He owed $2,000, and he got paid $2,000 to do it. It's crazy. It really is.
So he owed $2,000 to the cartel, and they paid him
for drugs.
And they paid him $2,000 to take care of the job.
To take care of them.
So in essence, they lost $4,000 to take out one guy.
Right. And got a 2-for-1 because they took her out.
But I think, they do that type of gruesome style kill
for sure.
to send a message, right?
For sure. So the message, so the gruesome kill is one thing, but the message is dispersing body parts. When you disperse body parts like that in an entire city, it's like, don't fuck with us because you're going to end up in the north side and the south side, literally.
See, I didn't know the cartel had reached all the way to Chicago because I know the mafia was the Italian mafia, the Russian mafia, the Irish.
Yeah.
They were in Chicago.
Yeah, the Flores twins ran all the distribution in the United States for Chapo, Peter and NJ Flores, especially in Chicago. They were in Chicago. We grew up in the same neighborhood.
And what year was this?
So this was 1999,
19...
summer of 1999. And if you look it up, Gangland made an episode on it, because what it was gang members. But what people don't realize is most gang members are affiliated with a cartel. They're all involved.
Most gang members are affiliated?
Yeah. Because think about it. The cartel hires runners. They hire doctors. They hire, accountants, lawyers, pediatricians. They hire everybody. It don't matter who you are. You could be at the bottom of the totem pole or at the top.
And they hire them for what purpose?
Because so gang members terrorize. They're pretty much like low-level terrorists, if you think about it.
Right, but what's a
stealing
pediatrician or a CPA going to do for them?
Well, a CPA is going to run all their money because the cartel is organized crime. It's an entity. So think about it. For example, let's look at what's it called? Ozark. So the guy from Ozark was their accountant. He was running their money for them because the cartel has businesses, legitimate businesses, so they have to wash money through the legitimate businesses. So you need somebody to watch the accounting through that. And then the pediatricians, you need a pediatrician that's going to be taking care of your kids. You need a doctor that's going to be taking care of your kids. You need an attorney that's going to be managing your businesses.
Representing you just in case.
Everything. What people don't understand is the cartel is immaculately structured down to, we don't know this because the media only shows you what they want you to see. Everybody's like, oh, how does she know that her husband was running drugs? I'm like, he was not running drugs. There wasn't kilos of cocaine under the floorboards or millions of dollars on the wall. That's what Netflix will show you. But they don't show you the accountants and the real estate agents that are selling homes, or the developers that are building compartments in homes so that you could stash money and or drugs.
So this happens when you're 15, and then you decide at that age that you're going to become a undercover FBI agent.
No, I actually decided that I was going to go into the feds because I wanted to be a profiler. I wanted to find out how and why somebody can do this to another person. In what mindset do you have to be able to do this to somebody else? Like, you have to not have any emotion at all. You have to be emotionless to take somebody's life away, an innocent person for that matter. Not just to take their life, but to desecrate their bodies like that and not feel any remorse for it. And then just go eat like tacos afterwards.
And when did this take place? This was, I imagine, was after high school and some
summer of
college,
'99. I was a sophomore when it happened, and so obviously I graduated high school, and then I went to college and got a forensic psychology degree. And also, for our viewers, when this happened, there was no iPhones. So there was no digital technology where you can, hey, this is my location. I'm going on a date. Here's my location. There was none of that. So this was like old school
Nokias and Palm Pilots and Blackberries.
Yeah. Where even then, I mean, we started pinging. So when I started doing undercover work, we started pinging phones. And pinging phones, you can only do that from the towers that they were transmitting. Now the technology is different. Like, we could just look at you in real time and figure out where you're at. Like, surveillance and undercover work is so easy now. We're sitting at home watching you.
Looking at you as in like through this?
Through your phone, through your camera system, through your laptop computers.
Without us even knowing.
Without you even knowing. The hackers now can liquefy your money from your bank accounts. They can switch names. They can switch identities. Yeah.
Well, thanks for the reassurance and confirmation on that.
So where should we just not have any money in the bank, or just put it in a piggy bank?
Listen, I interrogated a terrorist like probably a month ago. This man had all his money like under his mattress. He's Asian. But he was a digital terrorist. He was getting paid to do these jobs, and he was just stashing his money under his like mattress. And I'm like, why would you do that? He's like, because I don't trust the bank. He's like, I've taken so many millions from people. And I'm like, well, damn.
Talk about old school.
Talk about old school.
Cash underneath the mattress, basically.
But this is what really blew my mind is he was living in New York City and he was living like his rent was like $700. And I'm like, what do you do? He didn't have a car. He didn't have like his expenses were like $1,000 and he had millions.
I think he was trying to stay low key.
Low key.
Instead of driving around with the Rolls Royces and Bentleys.
Yes, but also the simplicity of his life was so beautiful to me because I'm like, you take millions from people for your clients and you live such a simple life. Like he's like, I have no friends. I eat noodles downstairs. He was living in the Chinese neighborhood and it just blew my mind. No debt, nothing, just money, no assets, didn't have any stocks, no Bitcoin, nothing, just money. Like actual
Cash
liquid money. Yeah.
What was the process like of becoming a federal agent? What did you have to go through?
Oh my goodness. I think people don't realize like how crazy it is. Like at the academy, only 30% of people actually graduate from the academy. 30%. Like you don't make it. And I think coming from my background, I want to say it was easy for me because they torture you emotionally and physically. Like they will take you while you're sleeping, they'll kidnap you and they'll take you to the woods and be like, find your way back with no shoes in the snow.
Training.
Literally, they do
Literally,
that.
yeah, because think about it. If you get to, I was taken. So it's like you need to understand maps, you need to understand directions and compasses, and you need to understand landmarking and remember, I just passed a tree, this, and that. But that's how you are built. Like now, everything is digitalized. Everything is digital. So you could just look at your phone. But if you think about it, we have become so accustomed to our GPSs that you still get lost. You're not looking at a map. But in reality, if you know directions and you're very directional savvy, you wouldn't need your GPS.
But
It's crazy.
Prior to you being kidnapped during your training, taken into the woods, did you have any training or?
That is the training. Survival of the fittest. It's like the military. Some people don't make it through boot camp. It's the same thing. And then they'll sit you in a room and they'll make you watch videos of people getting decapitated. And you have to deal with it because they're making you mentally strong. So think about it. I'm sitting there, I'm looking around, everybody's throwing up, and I'm like, this happened to my friend. Did this happen to your friend? So I was already coming with that advantage of growing up in the streets where this actually happened to a close family or, friend of mine, where a lot of these other people were just throwing up and they were mortified. It's like those videos where the terrorists were chopping off the, Americans' heads.
Yeah.
Same idea. You just have to sit there and watch it.
I remember there was a website.
There was a website
20 some years ago. What was it called?
It was something crazy, but but they were doing that.
What was it called?
It was like
something gate.
Wasn't it a mass like people were getting killed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everything from jumping off buildings
to electrocuted, all types of stuff. Like
Rotten. It was
yes, freak accidents, right?
Yeah. What was it called, Joe?
Rotten. It was called Rotten.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
And I remember.
Yeah.
I think I was in my late teens or so whenever the internet came out and I heard about it. I went on. I'm like, what the heck?
I mean, it's like you can't but not watch, right? It's like a train wreck. Like you hear about it at school and you're like, well, let me go check it out.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And then you cannot watch because you're just like, oh my God.
Before Rotten, it was Faces of Death.
Faces of Death.
Yes.
That's the one
Yes. Didn't they make a movie out of it? But
I
there
don't
was
know.
like a longer
I don't know about a movie, but
version of
Faces
it.
of Death sounds more familiar than Rotten. There was another one with like a gate or something, like GATE, like something gate. You had to go through a gate. I forgot what that
DH. You're talking about DH Gate, which was like illegal everything in regards to like videos and everything else.
DH Gate? Isn't
Yeah.
DH Gate like a knockoff of like China jerseys and all that stuff that they sell online now?
I don't know, but that's the only gate I remember.
Yeah. So let's fast forward now. You're officially a federal agent. How long were you working for the feds until you met your significant other?
Mm-hmm. So I did 2 years undercover. in Chicago, but I was based in Chicago, but undercover work was done all over the US. Some of the undercover work was also done in Mexico, Central America, all that. So in 2008, I was transferred to Houston to do human trafficking, drug dealing, and terrorism. Apparently, at the time, human trafficking was number one in Houston. So I ended up in Houston, but I didn't meet my ex until the year after I moved to like 2009. We met on Match. It was just a very chill vibe. Yeah.
And what was the vibe that you got from him when you guys first met?
I say this so many times. I feel like I picked him because he seemed like the safe bet. He was on the quieter side, he was on the reserve side, but he ended up not being the safe bet.
Interesting.
And we got engaged after 4 months. So that was probably like red flag number 1.
He basically popped the question right away.
4 months in.
And what did your family think of him?
My family loved him. He was the only man my dad actually liked. Everybody else my dad never liked. And now he's like, never again.
And did you meet his family?
Yeah, I met his family. I never got along with his father. Ever. We never got along. Because I did not fit the bill of the woman that he wanted him to end up with. He wanted a woman like his mother that didn't work, that was at home. Stay at home. They were Cuban, like hella crazy Cuban. So, washing dishes, making babies. And he was like, she's not for you. She has her own business. She has her own house. She has her own money. She can always just leave at any time.
And in order for you,
and he knew I was a Fed too.
Oh, he knew. Well,
yeah, of course he knew I was a Fed. Yeah.
Even though you were undercover.
So I was undercover in Chicago. By the time I made it to Houston, I was no longer undercover. I was an interrogator at this time.
A
profiler, yeah.
But then you had to go through the undercover route to become a profiler.
The undercover, came first. Yeah. So the fastest route to get the higher positions is you had to pay your dues. People don't want to do undercover work. It's not fun at all.
Because you're pretending to be somebody you're not.
You're pretending somebody you're not, but you're pretty much signing your life away. If you die, you die. It comes with the territory.
You sign a waiver, literally?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. You sign your life away. And you're pretty much consenting to, you can't sue the government if you end up dead, dismembered, and or decapitated, or lost in a different country.
Because as an undercover agent, you could be going into, let's say, a drug ring, and you're pretending to be a drug dealer or buyer or somebody, right?
Yeah.
And if they have any sense that, well, maybe you're not one of us, they could just terminate you. But
my undercover work is different. I'm 42 now. When I started undercover, I was 23. So if I was 23, I looked like I was 16. So I would just follow you around all day and you never knew it was me. I was the little kid with the backpack following you around or in the bushes in your house.
Oh, shit. Sure. You're like literally like that high school kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, I mean, we all know 23-year-olds. Again, your 23 is different than today's 23.
Right.
Today, a 23-year-old, I wouldn't even trust them to put a stamp on my envelope.
Right.
The fact that you were an undercover agent at 23, how does the government trust you to take that position?
This is the crazy part that people don't understand about the government. The government wants whippersnappers. By the time you're 40, you're out the door. You get a desk job. Now you're very valuable because of your experience, but the people on the field are the young ones. In fact, if you're over 36, you need to have a waiver to even apply to be a federal agent. That's the cutoff age is 36.
Kind of waiver, like a disability waiver? Or what?
Yeah, pretty much. No, not a disability waiver, but a waiver to be able to continue as an agent. So they want the young ones because the young ones have more energy, have more power. The older that you get, you're slower. But this is for the feds. This is not how it goes for law enforcement.
So it doesn't take any type of life experience or wisdom to be a good agent?
No. You learn everything on the job. You literally you learn as you go.
And not only that, she mentioned it. She goes, you said 30%, right?
30% that graduate actually make, only 30% of the graduating classes ever make it.
So you have testing, I'm assuming psychological testing as well. Yeah,
psychological. So polygraph, you do physical testing, you do psychological testing. You do, when I did my testing, it was like arithmetic and math, and they give you these crazy math problems, and then they give you barely any time to see how much you can get through them. But it's really, they're watching to see how you work under pressure. And then, of course, you have the polygraph. So the polygraph, anything goes. They can ask you whatever they want.
But
And
what's
then you
tip-
have what's called there's like 5. This is like towards the end, the last part before you go to the academy. You have a panel with like 5 agents, and they can just ask you whatever. And then that panel decides if you go to the academy or not.
what are they asking you during the polygraph?
They're asking you dumb questions like, did you ever blow a stop sign? I mean, you're 23. What, did you ever kill somebody? You go through an intensive background check. So they'll ask you like, have you ever stolen anything? Have you ever flown through a stop sign? Have you ever lied? Have you ever cheated? A lot of stuff like that.
So at this point, they know the answers to it. They're
Mhm.
just testing to see how you're answering it
Right.
and how you're doing under pressure.
Right. Because ultimately that's what it is. They're trying to build somebody that can work well under pressure. And most people that do make it work well under pressure. Like most of us can pass a polygraph no problems.
Interesting.
Yeah, because we know how to keep our
Composure.
respiration. And because a polygraph is a level of voluntary movements or involuntary movements. Really a combination of both, right? So like you can control your breathing. You can control your heart palpitations if you just relax yourself. But some people freak out and they're like, "Oh my God, they're asking me all these questions." So,
Yeah, because you're connected to an actual machine. You're second guessing yourself, thinking, "What if I answer it this way? What if I answer it that way? What if it beeps? What if it
Right.
doesn't?" So it kind of trips.
yeah,
a lot
and
of
then
people out.
what it is like your heart rate and your respiration. That's what it's testing. But there's better technology now. Now they have what's called eye detect, where they put a laser to your eye. And actually, this is a good way of knowing if somebody's lying to you. If they're lying, your eyes dilate.
Really?
Yeah, unless you're on drugs or you're completely sociopath. If you're lying, your eyes will dilate.
I mean, dilate to the point where you could
You could
notice
see
it?
it. Yeah. You know when you put a light to your eye,
Yes.
you dilate. So this technology has a laser that goes in your eye and measures 16,000 measures of your eyes in 60 seconds.
Holy shit. So there's no
So
going.
you could just
there's
ask somebody and they're like, "Oh, did you cheat or whatever?" And then you see their eyes dilate, you know they're lying. That's the new technology now.
So you can't control your eye dilation?
You can't. It's an involuntary motion.
Mm.
So the only way that you can surpass that is if you're high, on drugs.
You're dilated anyways.
Right. Or if you're drunk, you know?
Mm.
So if you're going to get interrogated, get drunk or high.
That's easy.
Free tip.
Drunk part's easy.
Right.
Not the high part. But
well, not everybody could get high. See, now, going back to your ex-husband, was he involved in the cartel when you guys got married, or did he jump into it later?
So that's kind of up for interpretation, right? So whenever he disclosed to me that him and his family had been part of the cartel, he did tell me he grew up in the cartel. His dad was moving drugs when he was a child. He said whenever he would go to high school, his car had compartments. He was on the baseball team, so his little truck had compartments. So his dad was putting, obviously, product in the compartments. In fact, his uncle, 2 of his uncles, against red flag number 2 and 3, both of his uncles were murdered. And I never asked. I was like, how were they murdered? One of his uncles was murdered, dismembered, and decapitated because he was moving $1 million worth of drugs from Texas up to Boston. And they stole the product and they murdered him. And they found the vehicle, obviously, without him and without the drugs.
and you knew this
No, he told me
marriage?
this. No, I didn't know that.
Afterwards.
Yeah, he told me
Afterwards.
this was part of the 2-hour where he told me, because I almost killed him. I had my gun on him and I went like this. I was going to shoot him. In the moment, I was going to kill him. I said, "How did you lie to me for 10 years after we got married? I gave you 2 babies and a home, and you knew I was a Fed." Like the selfishness behind that decision. He could have had any girl he wanted, but he wanted the Fed.
How did you find out?
He told me.
Was
He
he
told me.
sober?
Yeah. Yeah, he was sober. So what happened was I was approached by a publishing company during COVID to write the story of my life, which was the part where I was undercover, worked for the feds and all that. But when he read the transcript of the book before it went to publishing, he was triggered by all the trauma that I spoke about in the book, because we never discussed a lot of the trauma. This was another big flag, is he never wanted to talk about our past. So we never talked about our past. When we met, he's like, we're just going to talk about our relationship and forward. Never want to talk about ex-girlfriends, never want to talk about his childhood, which I thought was kind of weird, but I didn't really care. I was like, okay, whatever. So a lot of the things that were in my book, he didn't even know about because we never discussed my past.
And none of this was included in your training to question any of that. The fact that he was hiding his past or didn't want to discuss it.
Because in that moment, after I decided I wasn't going to kill him, I told myself, I said, okay, do what you do best and interrogate him. And all I said to him was, tell me more. And in those 2 hours, I gave him space to speak. And I always say that was probably the most authentic moment in our 10-year marriage, where I actually gave him the space to be honest with me. And for the next 2 hours, he told me everything. And then after that conversation, I said, I have to report this, right? And he said, yes.
Which was what? Can you share any of the details?
I had to. He pretty much said his dad used to move drugs. He said that he grew up in the cartel. His dad, there was a lot of money, there was a lot of drugs. And he shared with me how his car had compartments. And sometimes he was also running money and or drugs to whomever. And then, he did mention his uncle was murdered, dismembered, and decapitated, moving $1 million worth of cocaine. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of cocaine too for $1 million. And then after he disclosed all that, I said, I have to report this. So I reported it, but I didn't report it for like 3 weeks. And of course, the government did not like that. But I told them, I was like, I needed to process. I was in a house with the kids. The kids were little. I needed to process, right, the information that he was giving me. But obviously the government frowned upon it. They were like, what were you doing in those 3 weeks? You should have reported it that day. But it took 3 weeks.
They're absolutely right. Because at that point, you don't know what he's going through business-wise, emotionally, mentally.
Yeah.
What if he came out to you telling you this is what he's doing? He's part of the cartel, and possibly his last words to you. And if he's going to go out, maybe he'll take you and the kids with him.
Right. So this is where it gets a little iffy. So whenever I did report it, it went all the way up to the Pentagon. Because I remember when I called my supervisor, it must have felt like an hour of silence because she didn't even know what to say. She's like, this has never happened. But then she said, how did we drop the ball? Because they did a background on him before I got married. Because when you're a Fed, they do a background on your cohabitants and on the person you marry. So they did a background on him. But what people don't understand is when you're involved in money laundering and you're involved in the movement of money and you have a legitimate business, unless you have a forensic investigation on the actual finances, there's no way of knowing where the money, if the money is legitimate or not, if you have a legitimate business. So they did a background on him, but his background did not show like criminal activity. It didn't show any red flags, if that makes any sense.
But he was in real estate.
He was in real estate.
So when you say it didn't show any red flags, what type of real estate was he in?
Commercial.
And
who do you think is buying buildings in Houston?
At what level, though?
At the biggest level. He's a VP of a big company in Houston.
So he was pretty much washing money for cartels.
Yeah, but if you think about it, cartels buys businesses, especially buildings in Houston. Like they pay for these buildings and then they lease them out to big corporations like Chevron or Shell. Those big companies don't own the buildings. Somebody else, an LLC, owns those buildings and then lease them out to companies.
In essence, they're purchasing a building and they're becoming landlords.
Landlord, exactly.
Right, but if you're the Fed, you're investigating, you don't see where the money's coming from?
No, because I wasn't in finance. I was interrogating drug dealers, criminals. Think about it. I wasn't a forensic investigator.
No, not you, but when they
wouldn't be looking at accounts. They would only be looking at your background.
My mind is blown because
it's crazy, I know.
You're talking about, okay, let's put him aside. Okay? They couldn't find anything on him.
Right.
You have his father, who had 2 brothers that were killed, right? You said,
Hmm.
of which one of them, they mentioned he was decapitated, basically,
Yeah.
moving drugs. There was no ties to, well, why was the uncle killed? How is the uncle related to, how is the relationship with the father and uncle? Are they always tied together? Maybe they're connected to somebody. I mean, there's so many
So
moving
those,
parts there.
right, but those murders were unsolved. They were never solved. That's how there was no evidence.
I mean, the evidence
They were
is,
both unsolved crimes.
oh, as in like they never found the uncle at the time, or
No,
what?
they never, they found him, but there was no evidence of who did it, what happened. So they were like cold cases.
So they didn't even know that there was
Now this
there was
happened.
drugs moving.
They knew that, but that was it. But there was never any ties. It's crazy. It's wild. And it was like, oh, this was a cold case and it just went cold. And also keep in mind that dad spent 10 years living in Honduras. He wasn't even living in the States.
The father.
Our 10-year marriage, the dad was living in Honduras.
Now, do you think the father didn't like you because you were
A Fed.
a Fed? Yeah, see, you mentioned that he didn't like you because you weren't a traditional woman.
I wasn't a traditional woman, but the biggest thing was I was a Fed.
How did he not stop his son from even continuing?
It's crazy because his dad is a millionaire and we had this big blowout wedding. And it's so crazy because I think about it now and there were so many Feds at my wedding and everybody was sitting around like looking at each other like something's off, because all my Fed friends were there. The security was Feds at our wedding. His dad gave us $0 for $0 for this wedding. We paid for the wedding by ourselves. And then my parents gave us some money.
Well, he's a generous father-in-law.
Yeah. That day, can you imagine? He was like, don't marry her. But he still did. But if you think about it, looking back, it was like I was walking down the aisle, but it was the entire 10 years marriage was fraud. It was a fraudulent marriage because I married somebody I didn't know who he was. If I knew that he had been involved in any way, shape, or form, I wouldn't have married him.
Of course not. But
right.
What surprises me is that he grew up in a cartel family, and yet the father willingly or unwillingly allowed him to marry a Fed.
Yeah.
And
but also the dad wasn't living in the United States anymore. So that's where a lot of things go kind of hazy for me because I don't know. There's a lot of details that I still don't know till this day, right? So it's like the dad wasn't living in the US. He was living in Honduras. So there's speculation that the dad might have joined like witness protection program and might have removed himself at some point. But there was also lots of accounts that I ended up finding out later that had a lot of money in them.
Because I would think the father was up the food chain more than your ex was, right?
Of course, yeah, because it was his son.
Yeah. So, which means you have authority.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. He's your son. If you're both part of a cartel or any type of gang, mafia,
Whatever,
right? You have authority. So they have to follow your order, which is my order is you don't get to marry this woman because she's a Fed. I mean, I would think that's
right.
Cartel 101.
Listen, I would have loved that for me. Right? But in hindsight, the biggest thing is the selfishness. Like he didn't care. He didn't care for his future children. He didn't care for my career. He's like, I want the girl. I don't care. I'm going to have the girl. The selfishness behind it, that is very cartel mindset. I'm going to do what I want when I want.
Do you think his attraction to you was because you were a Fed?
Yes. Also that allurement. Let me push the envelope. Can I really do this? Because I remember when it all came out, even his mother said, why did you tell her? She could have gone another 10 years without knowing. I was like, because she was in it. She was with the dad for 25 years before she divorced him. So there was a lot of lying, cheating, and stealing. And she put up with it. But she was a housewife.
Do you know what led him to come out and say that this is what I do for a living?
Because my book triggered him. He said, reading the transcript of my book through these brown eyes, he read my book before I went to editing. He said that it triggered him to tell me his truth because I was telling my truth. And during the time we were in therapy, and I was starting to outgrow him. Like, I was starting to, write the book. I was starting to get noticed on podcasts. Because if you guys remember, during COVID, podcasts blew up because we were all stuck at home.
Yeah.
And podcasts blew up during 2020. I was invited on like 2-3 podcasts, and everybody wanted to hear my story of Undercover, this and that. And on top of that, this is crazy, I was working at the DEA office in the wire room during that time.
So how did this all happen? Did he like come home one day, sit you down?
No, I came home from second shift from the DA wire room, and he sat me down, and I was like, "Can this wait? I'm so tired." And he's like, "No, it can't wait." Again, selfishness. He needed to get it off his chest.
Talk about narcissism.
And
Yeah.
that's when you wanted to kill him.
Yeah, that's when I wanted to kill him.
You had your gun
I had my gun on
your
him,
hip.
and I went and I reached for it. And I just remember his eyes got real big. And then in a split second, I said, "Well, do what you do best. Separate wife from the situation." And I just said, "Tell me more." And then he just,
He didn't have a gun on him at the time.
no.
So you let him
I let him
sing
speak.
sing like a canary at that point.
Yep. I was like, "Go ahead and just tell me." And I just nodded my head. But in the back of my mind, I was like, wow. And I was already thinking, this is not going to go well. And what people don't understand is when you're a Fed, you give an oath to the government. I went under federal investigation for 7 weeks. The government didn't care what he was doing. They cared what I was doing because they thought I married him for the purposes of stealing secrets.
What kind of relationship did you and him have prior to him telling you that he was part of the cartel?
It was already on the rocks. We were already in therapy. We were already having problems. And what happened was I started to get more recognition from my life story. I started getting more on podcasts, and I started to kind of be a little bit in the limelight. And I think he felt kind of like disconnected. And then he started with the double standards. I actually had lost my contracts during COVID because the entire government shut down. There was an entire shutdown of the government. So we were all stuck at home. So I remember that's when he was like, "Well, you got to go do something," because my pay was cut.
So what was leading to the relationship falling apart? Because a lot of times it's either financial, maybe it's a husband cheating on a wife or a wife cheating on a husband. What was going on in the relationship that it was becoming shaky?
There was a lot of double standards. Like, there was a lot of money control. And this is another big red flag that I had spoken about to my family. And they said, this is weird. So we never shared accounts. I never saw any money coming in on his accounts, but he had access to my accounts. But he was my husband. So I trusted him with our finances because he's like, "I want to take on the finances." So I said, "Cool. Here's my money. Do what you got to do." But I never thought into wanting access to any of these accounts. It wasn't something that I was looking for or cared for. I was busy running a household, running my business, having babies, breastfeeding babies, and I trusted him. But that was probably the number one red flag, is that we never had shared accounts. I never knew how much money was coming in or how much money he was making.
Did you still want the relationship to work prior to him telling you?
No,
You were done with him.
I was done. I was done.
You were not in love with this man anymore.
No, but also think about this. You're with somebody and then they tell you who they really are. So you never really knew this person. So I was literally married to the enemy, literally, and had babies with him. So he wasn't the person that he portrayed himself to be. So there's like such a huge deceit. And it's like, if you forgive somebody after they've lied to you for so long, they're just going to continue to lie to you because they got away with it.
Now, as a mother, you have 2 kids, right?
I have 2 kids. And they're little still.
And they're boys, girls?
Girl and a boy, 8 and 6.
8 and 6. Your girl's 8 and your boy's
Mhm.
6. So I would imagine you have to still have some type of relationship with their father.
I have 75% custody. He has 25%. So he sees the kids. We do have a relationship. I've kept his identity safe, right? Obviously for the obvious reason. Our close family and friends obviously know who he is, but he keeps himself kind of hidden, even though he's a big VP for a big company. The crazy part about it is after my book came out, his career exploded.
So,
It's crazy. I know.
Okay, so you've I mean, you've disclosed and exposed the fact that your ex-husband is a cartel member and a VP of a big commercial real estate company, and yet his career has exploded. How does
Because
that make sense?
for commercial real estate brokerage, it's like Wolf on Wall Street. If you get away with something, you're the big dog. So it's like books were selling. I remember his old boss, the company before the new one, bought a bunch of books and like stacked them up on his desk and was like celebrating him. He's like, "Look at you, you're such a badass."
But I would
It's so
imagine.
weird.
Okay, so yeah, maybe I'm being oversimplifying this, but I'm thinking if he built his business based on washing money for the cartel, where they buy these commercial
It was lots
buildings
of businesses. It wasn't just one.
or multiple
Yeah,
businesses.
multiple businesses, but his main one, it was like it's commercial real estate.
Okay, so
Yeah.
after the fact that it's discovered, where you're like, okay, a federal agent is married to a cartel member, I would think the feds now would be investigating, meaning every money that comes through his company that he works for, he's a VP for, they're going to investigate. Okay, where's this money coming from?
But here's the thing, we never shared accounts. So the investigation was done on me. So phones were tapped, accounts were frozen, all of that. But they wanted to know if I was involved and I knew. So like they started listening to the calls where I was like drastically crying to my friends, like, "Oh my God, how did I not know this? And they were like, man. So after 7 weeks, they were like, so I was polygraphed, I was interrogated. Imagine being on the other side of the interrogation table. I was sitting there like, are you really gonna ask me this? And the interrogators were nervous because I'm considered one of the best ones in the world. So it's like, who do you bring in to interrogate
The interrogator.
the interrogator? So they were like stumbling through their words. And I'm telling them what I know. I'm like, look, I didn't know. But the biggest thing is like, I'm looking at them like, how did you guys drop the ball? Because us as feds, we don't do background checks on our own family members. We're not allowed to. It's the agency that's supposed to do the background on your
But
significant others.
I guess again, what's appalling to me is you were blacklisted from the Department of Defense, DOD.
I was blacklisted and partly because I decided to publish the book because I talk about it. Now, book 2 starts with the investigation I went under, the 7-week investigation, the polygraph, and everything that came afterwards. It's like the aftermath.
But how were you blacklisted? Yet he was not blacklisted. He was
He
promoted.
wasn't working. He wasn't working for the government. He was working for a private company.
I understand, but if I work for a private company, and if I were somehow washing money for cartel or some mafia group,
Because they never had any evidence. Like if you think about it, everything he said was hearsay. And I think that's what a lot of people get stuck on is like, if he's telling you one thing, the feds are not going to open an investigation on him. Federal investigations take years. Like it took 10 years to indict Chapo. It takes years and years and years because you have to get all this evidence to be able to bring into the court system. The feds were not going to open an investigation on him. It was like a dead end. Like, what are we investigating? Like, what are we investigating here? The investigation was on me because I gave the oath to the government that I would not be involved in criminal activity, and I married into the cartel. So the investigation was solely on me.
So
does any of this make sense to you?
It does. None of this makes sense because it's kind of like, all right, I just gave you a cartel member's information. I know he's part of this gang or this mafia.
Well, what he said, but here's the thing: like what he shared with me was my family and I were part of the Mexican cartel. That's what he shared. He didn't say I'm currently part of the Mexican cartel. That's what's still up for interpretation.
Was part of the
Yes, he said was part of the Mexican cartel.
But it's not easy to
Exactly
expose that.
Well, here's yes and no because what was the government like? Think about it. How is the government going to open investigation? Like to even subpoena, like you have to have reasonable cause. Just because he said he was part, they're not going to get subpoenas and all of that. Like, what are we investigating here?
So they're investigating you instead of him.
They investigated me because I put my hand on a Bible and said I will never be involved in criminal activity. So none of the investigation was on him. It was all on me. And I was like sitting there like, what the fuck? Because to me, It was like I felt like I had given 20 years of my life to the feds, and I was literally now sitting on the other side of the table. Like,
I'd feel
what?
betrayed.
That's what I felt like. Yeah. And then I still ended up getting blacklisted. And if you look at the timeline, so this all went down in February. The book published in November of
Of what year?
21.
Okay.
So he tells me in February, I tell them in March, they start the federal investigation. They find out that I'm not involved. So they gave me an ultimatum. The ultimatum was you either divorce him ASAP, remove yourself and your children from this home, this lifestyle, lavish lifestyle, or you're blacklisted. Pick one. I divorced him. By July, we were divorced. Took the kids out of the house, left, all of that. The book came out November of 21. I get suspended December of 21. I get terminated and blacklisted January of 21. It's not a coincidence. 22.
Because of the book.
Because I says it was because of the book, but they said it was reporting concerns. I've been writing reports for 20 years. There is nothing wrong with my reports. That's what says on the paperwork.
And you couldn't fight this in court.
I could, but I would have to get a whole federal, judge, and I had to go get a federal attorney. I mean, it's sometimes there's battles that you just can't fight.
Bro, by the time it sees the daylight of court, she'll be ready to retire at that point.
This is a federal court. You know what I mean? Like, it's federal stuff. And then how would I even prove it? You know what I mean? Because I even tried to get the paperwork for the 7-week investigation, and I still can't get it. It's been 3 years, 3.5 years.
What was the kids' reaction to this? And how old were the children?
They were too little. Like, my son was 3. My daughter was 5. They couldn't understand it. All they knew is that mommy and daddy had separated and we moved out of this big lavish house.
Do the kids know now?
The kids know that mommy and daddy separated because daddy lied.
That's it.
That's all they know. Yeah.
But
however, my daughter is starting to realize that something else happened because now I'm a public figure. And like the teachers at her school, or they're like, oh, your mom has a podcast. Oh, your mom is an author. So
that's
I try
what I was
to
gonna ask.
So I try to keep a very low profile. And so I told my daughter, I said, when you're old enough, I'll explain to you what happened. But all you need to know right now is that daddy lied and mommy left.
Because
because that's really what happened.
My kids know I have a podcast. They know. They're like, oh,
yeah. But my kids aren't sitting down and listening to it.
Well, neither are mine, but they know.
They know. Yeah, like my daughter, if you ask her, like my mommy does everything. She knows she's an agent. She's she's a podcaster. She does this and that.
Because I would think at 8, my oldest is 6, and every Monday is like, oh yeah, you're going to the WiseNuts Podcast. I'm like,
yeah. Same with my daughter.
But I think
I brought my kids on the podcast in season 1. We talked about divorce. We asked them how they felt about the divorce. My co-host and I were both divorced. We obviously have our separate stories, but we brought the kids on the podcast and they talked about it. And they said, it was better because mom and dad aren't fighting anymore, or we have 2 Christmases.
So how would you respond if your 8-year-old, or let's say when she's 9 or 10, watches one of these episodes and is like, oh wow, my dad was a what?
I don't think she understands, right? Like, I think for a 9-year-old, you'd have to sit with her and explain to her what cartel means.
But eventually they are going to understand.
Eventually they are going to understand. Yeah. And it is going to be a problem. So after the divorce, I took my kids to therapy. And I remember the therapist she was a psychologist. She read the book and she's like, oh my God, are you in therapy? Because she was just like, I cannot believe that you're dealing with this and the kids are dealing with this. So I told her, I said, it's going to get to a point, and he knows this, it's going to get to a point where the kids are going to read the book and they're going to find out what he did. And then he's going to have to deal with the backlash of them possibly disowning him as a father and being like, how could you do this? Why did you do this? All of his family, really. So even his mother, I told him, I'm like, enjoy the fact that the kids like you and love you, because there's going to come a point where they're going to have a lot of questions and you're not going to be able to answer these questions. And the relationship is not going to go how you want it to go.
Or it might go the opposite of what you're thinking right now. Your kids might turn around and tell you why did you separate us from dad? We would have had this lavish lifestyle.
No,
And-
they still have a lavish lifestyle.
no, I get it.
Yeah.
But it might be, and again, I'm not saying this is gonna happen.
Yeah.
But I'm saying your kids may turn around one day and be like, hey, you know what? No, this was better. You know, this was cool. This was this. This was, you don't know who
I
who
don't
your
think
kids
so.
are.
I think
again,
that they're
you don't know who
gonna
your kids are gonna.
question.
You don't know who they're gonna
why he
be.
did it. Yeah, it's a possibility for sure.
Because
Yeah.
uncle's grandfather,
Yeah,
their father,
yeah,
and all of a sudden, you got a boy, and I'm not saying it's going to happen or not.
yeah.
But if he turns around and says, hey, you know what? I want it to be part of the family business as well.
Well, let's
Yeah.
look at it this way. Let's say, even if you're much older, you're 18, 20 years old, you find out your father was moving drugs. And you're like, what do you mean? You're moving drugs? Yeah, I move drugs. I transport them because I'm a truck driver. I go state lines and whatnot.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, let's talk about this. So you sit down with your dad, you talk about it. And he said, look, I've never killed anybody. I'm just a truck driver that needed extra money to put you through private school, to put you through the college, to put you through the soccer camp you wanted to go to. So I had to do what I had to do to provide for the family.
Yeah.
Would that justify the story?
I don't think it'll justify the story, but it'll turn to the kid may turn to them and say, well, how much money did you make? Oh, well, I made X amount of dollars. If that kid has never seen that dollar amount and they hear it, you don't know how they'll react to it.
Well, it's funny you say that because yesterday, what are we doing? Monday, yesterday, we're at the park and my 6-year-old, we're sitting down there riding their scooters. He goes, Papa, how much money do you have? I said, so I pull out my wallet.
like
I'm playing stupid. I'm
at
like,
the point.
I pull out my wallet. I'm like, in my wallet? He goes, no, how much money do you have? I said, where? He goes, total. Like, how much?
A 6-year-old asked you that?
I said, you mean total?
Wow.
I'm like, what do you mean total? Like, he's like, no, all the money you have. How much money do you have? I said, I don't know, like $1,000. He's like, you have $1,000? I said, well, how much money do you think I have? He's like, I don't know. I want you to tell me. I'm like, what the fuck are you asking me? Like,
Where do you think that came from? Like watching something, right?
No, he.
Dad, what do you do for a living?
No, my kids mostly watch like soccer stuff or UFC stuff, or
Yeah.
sometimes they'll watch Mr. Beast.
Oh,
Or-
yeah. Mr. Beast will tell you everything.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's where they get it.
Dad, you
And-
don't have boatloads of cash.
Yeah,
I
it's,
thought one of the kids was going to turn around and say, Dad, did you ever move that 50 pounds a kilo
Yeah.
cocaine?
So
That's crazy.
that's what I'm thinking. If a 6-year-old is asking me how much money do you have, because he's asked me about numbers before, where he's like, he'll be like, Dad, do you have $1 million? And I'm like, what do you know what $1 million is? Where do you?
Yeah.
I'm like, where did you come up with that number?
Mhm.
So I don't know if he's heard it somewhere
Watching
on
something,
TV,
for sure.
where Mr. Beast is like, oh, we're on this island, it's $50,000, and then this is $100 million. So I don't know if that's where he heard it.
See, it's so fascinating how boys and girls' minds think. Because
Yeah.
my daughter is the same age as his older son. And with her, as far as finances is concerned, she'll never mention a dollar amount, but she'll always say, I want to work hard to be able to make enough money to live comfortably.
Oh.
And I think she always gets that because me and my wife, we always talk about let's set our lives up so we'll live comfortable. Let's set our lives up to live
So she
comfortable.
hears that comfortable.
So she hears it.
Whatever comfortable
What
means.
do you think my son hears? Oh yeah, I'm just gonna transfer $5 million here. Yeah, we're gonna buy this man.
No, it's like I'm gonna. I don't know. I don't know what he's hearing, but apparently there's dollar figures involved.
Yeah, for sure.
What's your CPA?
I mean, especially if he's watching Mr. Beast. Shout out to Mr. Beast.
it's no, because for example, we'll drive by, right, and even yesterday we were driving towards Pasadena, I think, and right under the bridge there was kind of like a homeless encampment,
Of course.
and then he's like, "What are they doing there?" So I said, these are homeless. I mean, he's seen homeless before.
Yeah.
She's like, so why are they living there? I said, because they don't make enough money and they didn't study in school and this
Oh
and that.
wow.
So
You're gonna end up there if you don't go to school. Oh my God.
Exactly.
Poor
So
baby.
it's not like I'm sitting home. I'm not like on my. Oh yeah. We're gonna transfer that $500 million. We're gonna buy this estate and man, and what's it called? Martha's Vineyard. No, we don't have, obviously don't have that type of conversations. But the fact that's what I'm saying.
They definitely listening and watching.
I'm
Yeah.
curious as to, eventually these episodes, they're gonna watch it and they're gonna be like, hold on, is mom talking about dad? And
Yeah, for sure.
And then all they need to do, just like my kids do now, is Alexa, what's a cartel? And then, well, a cartel is in boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And I think the older cousins have been getting to my daughter because my mom said, and it's the sister's kids. They're older. They're like 15, 16. So the 16-year-old said to my daughter, your mom has this really, really popular podcast. She's probably making all this money. She's got millions and millions of views. But that's all she tells her. Because it's technically her family too. The cousin is their family.
Yeah.
It's his side of the family. And then my mom or my daughter will ask, oh, she said that you have this really popular podcast. And I'm like, yeah, I do. She knows. She just doesn't know the context of it. So, but eventually she will ask.
She will eventually.
She will ask, yeah.
And
we just have to be prepared for it.
You have to be ready for that interrogation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you literally took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, start prepping yourself for it.
For sure. Yeah.
Children nowadays are becoming very, very curious, intelligent, and they're understanding how to ask questions a certain way. I mean, in essence, they're becoming professional interrogators.
Bro.
Well, the problem is like with the school, right? Like I try to keep a low profile, and as soon as they Google me or find out who I am, they're like, "Oh my God." And then they just want me to come in and talk or want me to come in and show a badge or whatever. And I'm just like, no, I don't do any of this.
And the thing is, your name is a very popular name as well.
Yeah.
I mean, in Angelica, and then you have Robles. Robles is like a very popular Latina name.
Common name.
If you Google me, everything comes up. So you're right. It's an Alexa away.
But going back to your story, I want to ask you this: at any point in time, were you fearful of your life or your kid's life when you and your husband separated?
I was, yeah, I definitely was. But then I thought, the cartel's probably laughing. They're like, huh, she finally found out, and this goes back. So here's the other thing that I tell people. If I would end up dead in a ditch, it's too much noise for the cartel. The cartel doesn't like noise. They don't like attention. So if I ended up dead in a ditch, I would have been plastered all over CNN. Ex-agent dead in a ditch. So after finding out,
So it's not like Breaking Bad.
No, not at all. No, it's too much noise. And there is a lot of cartel activity going on in Houston, and they're about their business. It's and I know this because I work in the field and I worked in the wire room. I remember when I was in that wire room, I was like, man, these guys are pumping gas next to you. They're at the grocery store, Target, Walmart, buying diapers, and you're right next to these people because they have to blend into their environments. You don't see them riding Lambos. Like, this is what Jay Flores and I were talking about. Like, yeah, Jay Flores had 3 Lambos, but they were in Mexico, covered in the mountains. He wasn't riding around those in Chicago.
Any of them have a yellow TRX by any chance?
I'm sure they had everything, But when you're at the level that, Chapo and the Flores twins were, you're not out there flashing. You have to you're driving the Toyota Corolla. You're driving the broke down, whatever it is.
But
you're not out there flashing.
Is Chapo the leader that the media portrayed, or is there somebody above him?
Chapo was the sacrificial lamb. He's the one sitting in prison. And the Flores twins are free.
At what cost?
Well, obviously they had to give a cost, right? Like they had to wear the wires, and they also had to pay their dues. The Flores twins went to prison for 12 years. They pay their dues.
So the Flores twins wore a wire for 10 years.
Yeah.
While being part of the cartel.
Yep.
That's what I can't
And
comprehend.
Chapo did not ever find out
How?
until he came into the courtroom and he looked and he saw the Flores twins there.
Because
And they were his. So Peter and Jay were number 3 and number 4 in the Sinaloa cartel in the order.
the one thing that hasn't changed in, I don't know, 50 years
Yeah,
is the wire. It's
of
still
course.
it's still something you strap on your chest. It's a wire
The
that
little
goes,
mic.
and then you got
The receiver.
got
Yeah.
the battery pack and the generator next to you. I mean,
It's wild, I know.
how nobody ever has
Well,
a
you also
scanner?
have to think about like what a lot of people don't realize is nowadays you can subpoena records. You subpoena texts through WhatsApp. You can subpoena even burner phones. We can tap into burner phones. The ones that and how you know that they find out that they're tapped is I remember they throw them out the window, and then when you track them, they're lost in the abyss. And then as soon as they get a brand new one, we wire up. The technology now is crazy. Like we can look at your texts, we can look at your calls, your voicemails, everything.
But the Flores brothers were wired the traditional way.
Yeah.
Right? For a decade.
But also think about it. The Flores twins were running the movement of drugs in North America. They were in Chicago most of the time while Chapo was in Mexico. So the communication with them was with the transporting from Mexico to the US. The Flores twins ran the US movement.
And not only that, you're talking about ranking wise. You said number 3 and number 4.
Yeah, Jay and Peter were
Who
number
is-
3 and number 4.
Imagine somebody lower than them questions. What do you think the response is going to be from them?
And then on top of that, you have the undercovers that are also in the midst of it,
That are protecting them.
that are protecting them.
Because look, I mean, I think if you're any type of illegal community member, whatever they're considered, right? I think the number one trait you have is you're paranoid, which means if I'm the number one guy, number two,
Oh yeah, PTSD is like
number
through
one
the
is
roof.
always checking number two, number one's checking number 3 and 4, 4 is checking 3 and 2, 2 is checking 1 and 5.
Right.
That's
But do you
why.
see how they restructure so quickly? That's why it's like the war against drugs is never going to end because the need for it is never going to end. There's the need for cocaine and the sale of cocaine. It's not something that's just going to die off. It's just going to restructure.
Well, it's not going to die off.
Never going to die.
I'll tell you
It
why.
runs business.
Well, you know why? You probably know this better than we do. Because the government's involved.
Right.
The government is the number one
They're getting
distributor.
paid off. Yep.
They're the number one distributor of drugs.
Right.
So it's never going to die off. The day
Yeah, and then the crazy thing is it is so well meticulated, and this is how Jay Flores explained it to me in our conversations. He says, "Imagine you're building a house, right? You have the electricians, you have the carpenters, you have the roofers. Everybody has their own job." He was saying that they even were hiring submarines to bring the stuff underwater. They were hiring construction workers to cause an accident or divert traffic so that the cops would go to this accident so that they can move drugs on the other side.
Everything was done strategically.
Everything is done strategically, logistically, like meticulously done.
Do you want to know when this drug game will die out? When they legalize it.
Like marijuana, like so California is legal, like Oregon,
a lot of states.
a lot of states.
As a government agent, federal agent, right? And I don't think any of you guys are naive. So if I have the perspective, which is I think the government is involved in all drug deals around the country, if not around the world. If the government decided in 2 weeks they want to get rid of the cartels or the mafia or whoever, boom, it's a done deal. I don't think they have an issue. They could send the military down to Mexico, wherever they need to send them down to. They'll get rid of them in no time. But they choose not to because, to me, they're business partners.
They're business partners.
So how, as a federal agent, knowing that, and you're agreeing with me, how do you work for an agency knowing that the crime you're fighting against, the government is partners with? How do you do that?
So it's business, right? Money talks. So, I'm a contractor, so I get paid. I get a paycheck for the work that I do. the work that I do is different, right? Like I go in, I gather information, I provide the information, and I'm out. But to your perspective, this country runs on business. People are getting paid off. Money talks. If you need something, hey, I know somebody. It's going to cost you this much. But also, it's $168 billion industry of drugs that are being moved around. So, with that much money being moved around, why would anybody want to stop it? If the own government is involved in it and everybody else is involved in it, it's stimulating the economy.
You can say the same thing about child sex trafficking. It's a
Sex trafficking is actually bigger than drug trafficking.
Okay.
And you can sell a child more than once. You can only sell drugs once.
Okay. So
Yeah.
child sex trafficking is probably a few $100 billion,
Even more. Right.
right? I don't know the number.
Worldwide, yeah. Because, children.
So it's
Or
making
people.
money. Do we just not do anything about it?
It's not that we don't do anything about it. Well, we'll never be able to stop it. Again,
course you
because
can.
we go back to the demand. The demand of it is higher than the efforts of wanting to stop it. And if you were to stop it completely, right, it's like killing something at the root of it. It's going to take down so many business deals and partnerships that are already been built for so many years. And I think a lot of people don't understand that.
So then human life has no value. It's all about money.
It's all about the money. Yeah.
Not human
And
value.
then even with this whole like big deportation, they're still going to come back because immigrants also stimulate the US economy.
Well, there will be immigrants,
Right.
but not 20 million. You'll get 2 million.
Like let's think of it like logistically, right? Like how much manpower and how many federal jobs are gonna so-called be opened up now? How many agents are gonna have to be recruited to try to literally have this mass deportation? Like literally, if you look at it logistically, it's a big feat. It's very, very difficult. Because he could sit there and be like, we're gonna have the biggest deportation the world has ever seen. But you have to set up the ability to do it. And that's crazy. Like right now, we're still low. Like right now, there's so much jobs at the border to be a CBP investigator or ICE or DHS.
Who were the majority of the people that came over the border?
The majority of people, obviously, because of proximity, obviously Mexicans, Central Americans, South Americans.
You had a lot of people from the Middle East come in. You had a lot of people
Yeah.
from Ukraine come in. You had a lot of people from Russia come in.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like in waves, right? Like
Absolutely.
right.
But you had this massive wave coming. You had people from
Right.
Palestine, from Israel, from Russia, from Ukraine
Well,
come in.
remember that those were like, see, the other thing that people don't understand is
Refugees.
yes.
So what's going to happen
There's
is
a difference
now-
between refugees and a difference between undocumented immigrants.
Correct. And
Yeah.
what's going to happen now is, and this you could, I'll bet money on this. One of the things that's going to happen is the war is over. There's peace in the Middle East.
Yeah.
There's peace in Russia and Ukraine. Pack your shit. It's time to go back.
Yeah.
Your visa's up. You were a refugee. No problem. It's time to go back. Because there was a lot of people
Yeah,
that
the
came.
refugees, yeah.
There was a lot of people that seeked refugee. All right, you know what? There's peace now. You can go back home.
Right. Yeah, I was in a conference where we talked about this, how there's a big difference in specification between refugees. Refugees get this like, oh, help me, woe is me. Whereas illegal undocumented immigrants are coming in, but they're coming from unsettled backgrounds or unsettled governments. They're coming from violence as well, but because they're not been stamped as refugees, they're undocumented immigrants.
There's videos of people
It's
crossing.
crazy. Like thousands and thousands of them.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's videos of people crossing over the border. And we were actually thinking about going over to the border ourselves to see what was going on. You have buses and masses of people that are from Pakistan, from India as well.
Yeah.
So the misconception here is a lot of people think that, oh, it's only Mexicans
No.
and Salvadorians
None of
and
that.
Guatemalans coming over the border. No, it's not.
all types of people.
It's all types of people.
They're just labeled differently.
No, I just, again, my my issue is knowing that the government is involved in everything.
Of course.
And if I'm sitting down investigating and interrogating somebody, knowing that, listen, I'm just investigating another arm of the government, essentially. I mean, I would question my own integrity.
We have paid assassins. Yeah.
Wait a minute. You said the government has hired assassins?
Yes.
Meaning?
They have people that are either prior special ops that they hire to take out other people.
So basically, like the guys who took out Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, pretty much.
So not economic assassins, actual political assassins.
Yeah, or they'll even stage. They'll go as far as staging your death. They'll say you got in a car accident, but they just shot you in the back.
So like they did with Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, pretty much.
Or JFK.
Or JFK, yeah. Yeah, there's hired assassins for sure. 100%.
So I'm curious, do you, at your level, do you have access to like JFK files or no?
Not at my level, no. Those files are so underground. Yeah. No, I wouldn't have
What's your
access to
theory
that.
on that?
I have a big theory. I like to always say everything was always done. Money talks again. I'm always going to say that is people are taken out strategically. Always.
So
Always.
what was the
I mean, even if you
strategy?
go back to Lincoln,
What was the strategy behind JFK? Lincoln was way before our time.
way before our time. I mean, so
Right.
was JFK, right? But I think with JFK, there was so much there to hide that it was like, let's just take them out. There was just a lot. There's probably so much that hasn't even been kind of sifted off from the stories that there's a lot there. Then you have the Marilyn Monroe thing. Like there's all these conspiracy theories that people talk about, but it's like, what do you believe or what's not real? But what I do know is things are created and logistically executed for a specific reason. Always to
You-
cover something else.
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
The CIA was founded in 1947.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of shit in the world and in the United States changed after 1947. Now, who had a hand in it? I don't really know who, but again, like I said, a lot of stuff changed after 1947 worldwide.
So the
Yeah.
CIA was founded in 1947. And
Correct.
then a year later, what else was founded?
A state,
Which one?
Israel.
Ah, interesting.
The CIA was founded. The word conspiracy theory was founded. There was a lot of stuff that took place after 1947.
I mean, we're not saying anything per se, but we are.
We're speculating.
Just, allegedly.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, I mean, nothing is concrete until it dries. It's still a little wet. I'm just saying. We're still in the mixing
I've never
process.
heard of that. So
That's a good one.
That's an
It's a
interesting
good one.
quote. I should
But-
use that more often.
That's funny.
But no, I mean, it's just it's crazy how so much shit, like I just mentioned, has taken place after a certain time period.
But I would think, especially after the whole, quote unquote pandemic, that people are realizing
That's wild.
nothing is a coincidence. Nothing just happens
No.
by accident, right?
Not at all.
Now, throughout your career, especially because you were married to a cartel member, did you ever get to interview or interrogate other cartel members?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What is it like when you're sitting down with these people, as far as looking, because you're a profiler, you're one of
Right.
the best in the world.
Yeah.
What is it like when you're profiling them, looking into their eyes, into their soul, to understand how and why they committed the heinous crimes that
Yeah.
they did? What do you see inside
They're
of
lost
them?
children. That's what they are. They're lost children stuck in men's bodies. And if you look at most cartel members, most of them are not past like 5'7", no more than 140 pounds. They're like these big egos stuck in these little bodies.
5'7", 140 pounds.
Yeah, like if you've seen Chapo, he's like 5'6", 140 pounds. Jay Flores is like 5'5", 120 pounds. They're tiny. They're all tiny little.
So how are they so powerful?
Exactly. So what it is again, power doesn't necessarily mean stature. Power comes with influence. So if you can influence a large group of people, then you have power. And so they were just influencing. And of course, fear. They were instilling fear in the certain population. whether it be blowing people up or guns, all that stuff.
Decapitating people.
Decapitating people, skinning people.
Were the assassins or the killers bigger?
No, not necessarily. I mean, look at the kid that just blew off the head of the United Healthcare guy. Like, did you guys see that guy? How
Yeah.
little he was? It's like everybody thinks that these assassins are like these big dudes. It's actually the opposite. They need to be small so they can hide.
To be nimble and just get
Yeah.
away with it, huh?
Think about it. I was undercover. I was little. I was 23. I was probably like 130, tiny. I was hiding in the bushes, literally for days at a time.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And speaking of hiding in the bushes, I mean, how do you live a normal life? How do you lead a normal life if
You
you're
don't. You don't. I think the person that suffered the most was probably my mother, because she would only get calls and I'd be like, I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive. And so my mother for probably 2 years was like, God, I hope she's not dead somewhere. She was just waiting for me to say, I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm good. But for 2 years, it's a long time to be undercover, especially for a woman. It's hard for a woman to be undercover. Think about it. And I'd say this so many times. And I got on one stage here in LA and I told everybody, for a woman to be undercover is very difficult. We can't pee in a bottle. Think about it. We literally used to have little buckets with sand and we would shit in the buckets of sand because you can't leave your spot.
Jesus Christ.
It's
dude.
not, the old school undercover is not like today. That old school is like you're in the van with the little camcorder like this. The surveillance and the undercover now, it's not like that anymore. I can wear a little pin. You won't even notice. It could be this button right here and it's picking up audio and visual. You don't even notice. But that's not what we had, the technology that we had when I was undercover.
It was the black tinted van.
With the curtains. I had a bag that I talked when I went into one of my undercover missions. I went into a salon to get my hair dyed. I literally had a bag and we cut a hole on the outside of the bag and we had a camera in there. And I put the bag right in front of the lady that was doing my hair to catch all the activity that was happening in the back. They were putting cocaine inside those giant shampoo bottles.
Oh wow.
And that's how they were transporting it.
Now, as a female undercover, let's say, because majority of the people you were trying to bust are men, right?
Yeah. But you'd be surprised. I talk about this in another podcast. The paleta lady, everybody is connected to the cartel. You'll have like the lady that's selling tacos that's distracting another exchange that's going on. And then you see the little taco lady roll up and she leaves in the back and then she's in an Escalade. Everybody has a spot in a position that
A
they play.
front or something.
They
Yeah.
have a
course.
role. Each person plays the role.
Everybody plays a role.
But I'm thinking
Down to like construction workers,
I'm thinking as a female operate undercover, right? If there's majority men involved, somehow they're gonna come on to you.
Yeah. Now remember, my play that I was playing was I was a little kid. A lot of times, like I wasn't doing undercover like this now. Now, how I look now is how I get into the guys' minds. When I walk into interrogation rooms, guys look at me and there's like a 2 second where your brain, especially the male brain, they start fixing themselves and they forget why they're there. They're like, oh my gosh, she's so pretty. Let me fix my hair. Do I look good? And then their defenses go down. So it's a different strategy, right? But when you're undercover, I was just with little headphones, a backpack, pigtails.
So you're playing a kid's role.
I'm
as
playing
an
a kid's
undercover.
role.
When interrogating these individuals, were you speaking to them in Spanish or English?
Both.
What did you start with?
It depends who they are. Most of the people that we were interrogating are already in custody, which means they're ready to talk. Keep in mind, a lot of these people are given deals. What are you going to tell us? What do you want in return? Most of these people want anonymity and they want citizenship because it's the runners that lead us to the big fish. So you start with the runners and you move your way up until the big fish.
So they were willing to be informants for you
They
guys.
were willing to be informants, but also they were willing to do whatever it was that we needed so that they can get anonymity and they can get citizenship.
Knowing that their as a possibility that
they may
then
end up dead and
Yes.
skinned. Same idea. And most of them did. I remember when I'd go work at the border, I didn't realize. I remember telling my because I would always go to the border and work. The safe house was not safe. When I would go interrogate to the border, I'd probably have like a 3-agent detail on me. And I remember they would lock me in the safe house and they're like, "What do you want to eat?" And I'd be like, "Just bring me a bucket of soup." So I had the soup for like 2-3 days because you couldn't leave the safe house. But outside of the safe house, there was bodies hanging from the viaducts, and it was normal because this is cartel land. And I remember the kids walking to school. I remember coming home and telling my mom this. The kids walking to school, just hanging out, dancing, and there's bodies hanging, rotting, and it was part of the culture. Or decapitated bodies, body parts, from explosions. And here's the thing, the morgue and even the local police has no control over these cartel cities anymore. They're just like, we don't know what to do because they don't run them anymore. So the kids that live there, the people that work there have now been accustomed. This is their life. Kind of like being in the hood and shots start firing through the windows and you just go to the floor.
duck and cover.
Yeah.
You have
Same idea.
So you have bodies hanging from light poles and
Yeah.
street lights and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Ed Calderon talks about this all the time too. And he's like, people don't realize that this is true. It really is true. Because this is how they show, like, don't fuck with us. And then they leave the bodies up there.
and it was
And they're
always,
cartel bodies. So the police is not going to bring them down. For what? Then they're now they're involved.
That's what I was about to ask you.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, majority of the people that are involved, it's not just your local postman or milkman or whatever it is. It's gang on gang crime, or it's
Right.
cartel on cartel crime.
Right. Right.
So it's somebody who either dropped the ball, owed somebody money.
It's always somebody didn't do what they were supposed to do or they owed money and essentially dropped the ball.
And there's no second chances with them.
No. You
You
fuck
screw
up
up
once,
once.
you're done.
Wow.
On to the next, and then they restructure.
Jeez, man.
But one of the crazy things that I'm going to throw out there, because I had this conversation with Jay, the US is actually arming the cartel. Because all of the guns that are coming out of the US, they're going across the border and they're giving them to the cartel. Because here's the thing, most of the scanners are coming in to the country. They don't give a fuck what you're taking out the country. So the US is arming the cartel, literally. All of the gun sales and all of that are going right across the border.
That's what I mean. I mean,
They don't care. They're like,
they're in business with them.
right.
That's why I can't imagine never working
Right.
for the government, knowing that, look, the crime I'm fighting is actually our
The
sister
government pays really
company.
well.
Yeah, it's our partners who get paid more than I do, but now I'm fighting and I'm putting my life on the line for
Listen, the military gets paid off. The pilots, they're getting paid off just to bring the cocaine into the United States, whether it be by sea, land, horses, underground, whatever. Think about it. You need construction workers to dig tunnels. You need submarine drivers to work the submarines. You need freaking horses to run across the border. Everybody's getting paid off. Everybody. Just like the people that are bringing, the coyotes, at a cost, they'll bring your whole family across the border. Whatever it is that you need.
So there's no end to this game.
No, never. There's no end to it.
Were there any repercussions from your fellow FBI agents when the truth came out? Were you looked at as a villain or somebody who has betrayed the government? What was the reaction from your fellow?
There was 50-50 divide. Surprisingly, like the ones that were close friends of mine were almost like she's a victim. And then everybody else is like, nah, she was involved. And I think it did play a big role into the investigation because then they interviewed everybody that I had dealings with, my coworkers. And then some of them were like, nah, get rid of her, get rid of her. And then some of them were like, she really didn't know. She really didn't know. So it was like 50-50 divide.
Did any of them confront you at all?
No, I think they were fearful. They were like, nah. They were talk shit because I heard it, but they wouldn't confront me. No, I have some that just never that stopped talking to me altogether.
Because they're
Like they
like,
just went ghost. Yeah.
you know what? She's an informant at this point,
Yeah.
and we don't want to have anything to do with her.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest fear is guilty by association.
Guilty by association, or do you think they
Yeah,
were possibly?
that they were like, I don't want to be caught talking to her because they knew my phones were tapped. They knew the phones were tapped. They knew the text messages were being read. So a lot of them were just like, I'd rather not have contact with her.
Do you think they were more afraid of the feds or the cartel?
They were more for the feds because they were afraid of them losing their job. Think about it, it's their livelihood. Not the cartel. The cartel's not going to do anything to anybody that wasn't involved in anything.
Okay.
So as you were, let's say, even investigating the cartels, was there ever any concerns as far as repercussions for you or your family where they're going to retaliate because you've caught one or multiple members of the cartel?
No, and you know why? Because I was like, for my ex to tell me his secrets, he must have felt comfortable enough in his position that it wasn't gonna have an impact on him. He didn't care. Because I even told him, I was like, I have to report this. And he knew he had to report it. And here's the thing that I keep telling people: cartel members are used to getting their way, and rules do not apply to them. They literally think that they're untouchable. That's what they think. And it's a mentality that they have, and that's why they're probably so as successful. You know, like Chapo was like, I'm never gonna get caught. And he would escape and keep escaping. You know, he never thought that he would get caught. And now he's complaining about his like situation.
And your ex was never in a situation where the cartel thought, okay, this guy intentionally married a federal agent because he was an informant for the feds. They never looked at it from that
No,
perspective.
because of what he was involved in. When you're think about it. Like let's again I go back to Ozark because people understand Ozark. It's an easy story to understand. He was an accountant for a legitimate company and he started working for the cartel. Now Ozark is a little bit out there, right? Because he really did have the drugs and he really did have the money and the walls and stuff like that. But if you look at the basis of it, if you're a contractor or if you're a construction worker, you're not going to go after the construction worker that told his wife. He wasn't he his part wasn't that big to cause a divide within the cartel, if that makes any sense. Like he wasn't a Jay Flores, you know, that was running shit. He was somebody that was washing money just like 500 other people that own businesses that are washing money. He was doing a job and then repaying back.
They looked at it as like this: we have $50 million in the bank or in a barrel. What are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
Hey, let's reach out to your ex-husband and see what's
Right.
available to purchase. And the way we'll wash that $50 million is
Right.
we'll buy this building, we'll occupy it with a tenant or whoever it is.
Yep.
That tenant will pay us rent and we'll continue to launder the money.
But
That
if
is
you,
that is if there is a real tenant in there or if it's just purchased to collect
Yeah.
but
free
if
rent.
you at any point question or
Yeah.
doubt, thinking, oh, he's an informant because he's married to a Fed, and the Fed is gathering
But here's what's crazy. The cartels knew what my position was. They knew that I was one of the interrogators. So I felt like the cartel members were laughing. They were like, man, this motherfucker does this for us and married this chick. And this girl's here interrogating our partners. I think they were laughing. Like I told this to Jay Flores. I think they were laughing. Like, man, he got away with this. Like to them it was entertainment. It wasn't like, "Oh my god, he's going to take down our organization. What a dick." Because he wasn't at that position. Now, if it would have been a Jay Flores or would have been somebody that actually was in charge of moving large amounts of money, then that would have been different because then it puts a damper into what they're trying to create. Now I become a liability.
He's not in charge of anything
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
important. He's
Yeah,
basically somewhat of a middleman for a transaction that's taking
right.
place.
And it was a financial aspect of the cartel. You know, it's like the transactionals. Like all those things you don't see. Even if, like I said, even if the government was to open an investigation, they would have to bring forensic investigators in to start looking at accounts and money moving in and out and all that.
And not only that, look at
It
it.
wasn't
This,
actual physical drugs that were being moved. It was actual money that was being transferred from accounts to accounts.
exactly. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
There was no harm he could do to their money, because what it was is the money's in the account. What can we do with it? I mean, the worst harm he could do is potentially lose a deposit.
That's a big deal for them.
Yeah, but for the government to open an investigation on hearsay, they're not going to do it. It's like if you called the FBI right now and said, "Oh, I think there's a bomb in this building." They're going to be like, "Oh, why do you think that?" "I don't know, there's a guy with a backpack." Okay. That's it. It's like there wasn't substantial evidence for them to even look into it. It's like, what do you mean? What do you how was you involved? Also his dad was involved. It's like too much work and there's not enough manpower.
Yeah. Okay, so all this is going on as far as your divorce, you finding out your husband was working for the cartel, your coworkers, your bosses, possibly potentially thinking you may be some sort of informant for the cartel,
Mhm.
you completely taking your kids out of a home, moving to another one. Your life is completely done a 180, right?
Yep.
At this point, do you look at yourself as a hero or do you look at yourself as a villain?
I'm going to say hero because I turned lemons into like literally lemons into lemonade. So from the book, I became a bestseller. And then from the best selling, like I lived off of book sales because I was blacklisted from the government. I didn't have to touch my savings, right? So I lived off of book sales and then I sold my story to Hollywood. So I was like, 20 years I spent in the government, gave my life to them, almost lost my life to them so that they can blacklist me and kick me to the curb. And I'm like, thank God I wrote this book because it opened up a whole nother line of work for me. Now I do podcasts, motivational speaking, writing a second book. Now I'm an executive producer. So the worst thing that happened to me was the best thing that happened to me.
Now, if the FBI came back and offered you another position, would you take it?
They did. And I declined.
You declined.
I declined. But I mean, I still consult. I'm a consultant for the government. I still work on high risk cases as a consultant.
Can you name a high risk case that you're consulting on?
Um, yeah, I mean, like the Diddy stuff, working a little bit on that, and then of course the New York City mayor. So
What is it in the Diddy stuff that you're working on?
I can't say.
The mayor meaning Eric Adams?
Yes. Yes. He's still holding office, by the way. But I was over there in his office speaking with all the people.
Mayor Eric Adams.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he's still in office. Even though he has federal indictments, like he's still in office until he goes to trial.
Are there people that you're speaking to that are involved in the Diddy scandal that will be potentially put on the stand?
For sure. For sure.
Are we looking at more than 50 people?
Yes.
More than 100 people?
Yes.
And these are legit witnesses,
Yeah.
victims,
Yeah.
people that were possibly drugged, raped,
Yeah.
assaulted.
For sure. The evidence is so damning. Everything that they found whenever they went in is substantial. I mean, tapes, lots and lots of tapes.
See, I don't know if it's a rumor or not, but what they're saying is whether it's the feds or the DOJ or whoever it is, they have so much footage from these Diddy parties that it's going to put a lot of people, a lot of very powerful people away for a very, very long time. And majority of them are saying that this was done strategically by Diddy in order to be able to blackmail them.
It's a possibility.
Similar to Epstein.
Yeah.
Because recently, Jay-Z's name also came out as far as he's being
Involvement.
convicted. With a allegedly a
13-year-old, yeah.
13-year-old girl that he allegedly raped.
That's a big allegation. For somebody to have an allegation of that magnitude without any evidence, especially with the caliber of attorney, is huge. And a lot of people think that they're just going to settle. So think about it. In a civil suit, ideally, the settlement needs to happen so that you don't take it to trial. Because once you go to trial, everything gets aired out, right? Like Cassie, everybody settled. But that kind of spun for everybody else to kind of start leaking. Because, there's so many NDAs that were signed.
It's funny.
Just talking all
These
types
guys
of
don't
mess.
sign an NDA, or
Yeah, they do sign an NDA. So an NDA usually is between 1 to 2 years. But when there's so much damning evidence on you, you screw the NDA, because guess what? They're not going to come after you for violating terms on an NDA when there's so much other incriminating evidence on you. Like, you're not, fuck the NDA people. At this point, you got to deal with the bigger fish over here. It's all this other evidence that they found. So that's why all the people are coming forward now, including, because a lot of these people, these parties, you do two things when you walk into this party. You give up your phone and you sign an NDA. That's what happens at every party like this. So not only is there footage in the Fed's hands, but there's probably other people that have footage. Like, back to the Kim Porter, right? She wrote a book and then she gave a jump drive to whomever, and then they published that book, right? And it's like a lot of things are starting to make sense. A lot of things are starting to get put together. But to me, it's crazy that somebody that has that much money and that much power got away with so much like this for so long. But you know what they say, the truth always comes to light, one way or another.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm excited. It's going to be a great trial. I can't wait.
So going back to the FBI, the cartel, if you can go back in time, would you change anything? Maybe something in the lines of vetting your ex-husband a little more, possibly looking into your ex-father-in-law, the uncles, just kind of seeing who this individual really is before marrying him or getting engaged to him 4 months into meeting him on match.com.
Right.
Would you change anything?
Off the bat, I would say no, because if I did, that would mean I wouldn't have my children, right? My children are probably like the most amazing thing of my life. But I probably, as soon as he said he didn't want to talk about his childhood and his past, I probably would have been out, because I would have been like, why? What's so bad about it?
Do you think it was you being young and naive and a new federal agent at the time, or was it you kind of in love?
I was in love. We definitely fell in love. There was definitely love there. Yeah. Because it was a very fairy tale, big ring, all that. We were young. So, yeah, definitely.
Was it his personality that kind of made you gravitate towards him, or was it the
Yeah.
money?
No. Because I had money at the time too. We both had money. It wasn't, the money was nice, but it was more of his personality. He was quiet. He was a total opposite of me
And when did he begin to change?
when the ink dried.
Really?
When the ink dried, everything changed. Yeah. We moved to the suburbs, couldn't have any more parties, couldn't hang out with my friends. He isolated me.
So he wasn't letting you reach out to any friends,
No.
anything like that?
Mhm. And that's usually what they do in those relationships. And I was pregnant and breastfeeding for 6 years. So for 10 years, I was pregnant. So we just kept having baby after baby, because we lost a baby in between my daughter and my son.
So you guys only have 2 kids together?
We have 2, but we lost one in between. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. But that was his way of, if she's pregnant and breastfeeding, she's at home and she won't leave. Because I don't think he ever thought I would leave, just like his mother never left until they got too bad.
So initially he wanted to make you a homemaker. That's what he wanted.
No, because we were 50-50. And that's another thing that people don't understand is he was never really a provider or protector. I was paying 50% of everything. He was paying 50%. Even though he made substantially double the money that I was making, I was still contributing to all the bills and all the house expenses.
Of what you didn't see, basically, though.
I never knew how much money was coming in on his end.
Did you ever find out?
I did, but he made me sign an NDA. So I signed an NDA for his financial activities that were disclosed on an additional discovery. I did a secret discovery on his ass.
But you also had him sign a release so you can write the book, right?
I did have him sign a release, and he thought that the book was just gonna, he's like, "You're your stupid little book," and it hit. So he gave me permission to write what he told me. So yeah,
Damn. But obviously not use his name.
of course, yeah, not use his name.
Wow.
And I've kept his identity, secret. Obviously, he's still the father of my kids, and he still pays me child support. So
Did kids keep the last name?
yes,
So they have his last
yeah,
name.
the kids have his last name, but it's Lopez. So
But I mean, see, going back
how many
and
cartel
looking,
members are Lopez?
but see, going,
Like 75%.
but going back and pulling records because you guys were legally married on paper, right?
Yeah, you can look up all that stuff, but his name is also very common.
Like Juan.
Yeah, something like that.
Jose Garcia.
It said Lopez.
Okay, Jose Lopez.
Wait a minute. Were you married to Mario Lopez?
No, definitely not.
Well, Angelica, I want to thank you for taking time out of your Monday to be with us, flying out from Houston and taking time to sit down and open up about your past, which is a hell of a story.
Yeah,
And we truly hope to collaborate more with you in upcoming episodes in 2025.
for sure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We wish you a safe flight back as well. And what else?
Stay in touch.
Stay in
Yes,
touch.
for sure.
Because
Thank you.
we see a lot of great things happening as far as collaborating with you.
For sure.
Everybody else, today's podcast will be up and running on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major platforms mañana. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll see you guys all next Monday.